I'm gonna quickly, my name is Molly. There I am right there. I've been in P&O for about 20 years, and I own a company called McCoy Consulting, which is just me, and basically I help people with documentation and coding and billing support. And I work with SPS through the code program. So the code program is a service of SPS where they pay my fee for their customers so that they can get help with documentation and billing. So that's kind of my background. And then I will have my contact information at the end of the presentation, so you can get a hold of me if you have any questions. Thank you, Anna, for reminding me of that. Okay, so we're also going to talk about where does the LCD fit in as far as in the whole scheme of billing, and for you being future clinicians, what's the difference between Medicare and private insurance, and how do they all work together? We'll look at that. And then why do we talk so much about Medicare? Why is everyone so focused on them, and why don't we hear as much about private insurance? There's a reason for that. We'll talk about it. And then what are the important parts of the LCD for us to know? Again, this is where the cheat sheet comes in, where I say that you have a little sheet that pulls out the most important points from the LCD relevant to what you have to write as a practitioner in your notes. So that's what that second sheet is, right? Okay, we're going to boil down the LCD, which is the policy for Medicare. Policy is just the guidelines for how they pay things. And we're going to figure out what the relevance is. And then we have some secret knowledge. It's not secret, but for some reason, a lot of practitioners are not aware of it. So we're going to talk about, this information that you can be aware of and that you can understand, and that will help you when you go out to, into practice and are trying to market your practice and be successful. And then we're going to show you some examples of poor documentation and how you could fix that. Okay, so let's just start out right away here with what is the LCD. The LCD is, the abbreviation is the local coverage determination. And basically what it is Medicare's guideline for how you document and bill for certain items. There is not a local coverage determination for everything that we do in P&O. But there are local coverage determinations for the big things that we do, for the most volume. So today we're going to look at those high volume items like lower limb prosthetics and AFOs and KAFOs. So that's where we're going to focus because that's what you'll probably see the most of. So the thing that goes along with the LCD is called the policy article. The policy article is just a clarification and some detail about the regulation that you see in the LCD. So they are constantly changing and updated. It's not a document where you print it off and, 6 months or a year later, it's the same and you don't have to worry about it. You really have to keep up with it. Medicare changes them anywhere from every 3 months to every 6 months to every year. So they really are kind of all the time updating and changing it. So just be aware of that. And in the past, practitioners would frequently consider the LCD and documentation and policy and that kind of thing, really the domain of office staff. But I'm going to tell you something different than what you might hear in practice. And the reason I say this is because it's changed. When I first started in P&O, I didn't know what an LCD was. I didn't even know how Medicare worked. To be honest with you, I didn't know the difference between Medicare and Medicaid or the parts of the policies or anything because we didn't need to know that as practitioners. It was for the front office. That's not the case for you as new practitioners. You will have to be aware of this stuff. You can have the best biller in the world, and if your notes don't work and if you're not saying the right things, then they can't save you. You're still going to have a problem with billing unless you write what you need to write. So, okay. So where does the LCD fit in overall policy? Here's a schematic. This is real. I can't believe this is real, but here's our healthcare system in the U.S. This is a schematic of it. And so where's the LCD? Where's the part of policy that we're going to talk about today? It's in this neighborhood. Okay. So it's pretty daunting. This is a huge, complex system, and it's really hard to remember when you're in the thick of it that we are just one very small part of that huge system. That isn't to say that you're not under scrutiny and that Medicare isn't looking at you, because they are. Um, in that huge system, they have some really great software and algorithms that will catch the smallest mistakes. Even though the system is giant, don't think that you can fly under the radar and they won't notice, because they do notice. So, and the LCD is really only one part of a lot of regulation you need to be aware of. So we're going to talk about that today, but you still need to have an awareness and an understanding of the other parts of Medicare policy, which would be like the program integrity manual, the supplier manual, some other things like that. So I just wanted to throw out there before we go too far that if you're not aware, Medicare is switching from a pay for performance, or from a fee for service model, which means, whatever we do, we bill for and they pay, to a pay for performance model. And what that means for you in not too long into your career, nobody knows when this is going to happen specifically for P&O, but it is on the horizon. And what it means for you as future practitioners is that your payment will basically be based on how the patient does. So you would get paid a set amount, and then if the patient has a good outcome a few months later, you might get paid a bonus, or you might get paid extra money, or you get paid a certain amount, and if the patient declines or doesn't do as well in the, down the road, then you might get a recoupment where you have to pay that money back. So why do we talk so much about Medicare? Medicare, as far as how it works in the system, hopefully you guys haven't talked too much about this. Stop me if you already know all this, but the way Medicare works is it's about 30% of overall billing for healthcare in the U.S. So about a third of everything we do in healthcare is through Medicare. So that's one reason we talk so much about it. We also talk a lot about it because the government puts together policies and information and turns that into rules and regulations. And since they've done all the work, often private insurance companies and state Medicaids will just follow suit. That's why it's such a big deal. Usually, or pretty often, whatever Medicare does, the rest of insurance will do. So you need to definitely understand Medicare policy as a good start to understanding other healthcare policies. Okay, so this is the end of the presentation, because all you need to do is memorize the whole LCD. I'm just kidding about that. You're not going to memorize that if you're holding it in your hands right now and you're thinking, this is a huge document. How could it possibly, how could I learn all of this on top of all the stuff I'm trying to learn just to be a practitioner, without having to know documentation? You don't have to memorize the whole thing. You do rely on your billing staff, but there are certain parts that you need to know that will make it easier on you and your staff. So let's talk about the relevant portions. Using the LCD for AFOs as an example. So I'm going to give you a second to pull that out there. Hopefully you can grab that LCD. And again, you should have one handout that says like LCD-based cheat sheet or LCD-based documentation checklist for AFOs, L1960, something like that. So that's what you probably want to have in front of you. And then as a backup, the full LCD. Just one example. So an L1960 AFO, right? That's a billing code for a particular type of AFO. That AFO would be covered for ambulatory individuals if they have weakness or deformity of the foot and ankle, or nerve or muscle dysfunction, and they require stabilization for medical reasons. Okay, so you might ask yourself, okay, this all makes sense. In order to qualify to bill Medicare for that code for a patient, they need to have weakness or deformity or the nerve or muscle dysfunction, and that has to be documented by the doctor and you. So that makes sense. But then when it says who requires stabilization for medical reasons, you might be thinking, wait, what is a medical reason? What does that mean? Basically, what they mean by that is just that the person may, say your person comes in and they need ankle stabilization for to be able to walk on a runway as a semi-professional model, but their full-time job is as a teacher in a classroom. Okay, so if that's the case, then if they can walk around without an AFO to be a teacher, but to be a runway model on the side, they need the AFO. That's not a medical reason, right? It has to be something related to overall health and well-being, to overall rehabilitation, to overall mobility, or to work or community involvement, any of those things. But it can't just be because they need it to do a certain activity that maybe is not related to health, right? So that's all that means. They also need to have the potential to benefit functionally. And hopefully you're asking like, well, what's a functional benefit? And along the same lines, a functional benefit is if they have that brace, then they can do a functional activity that they couldn't do without it. And functionality, again, is anything that gets them involved in the community, so out into the community, not shut up in their house all the time. Anything that gives them overall health and well-being, so exercise or anything like that, or anything that gives them independence. So maybe home maintenance, those kind of things. If they have to maintain their home, they have to mow the lawn, whatever it is, they'd need to. That's a functional benefit of having an AFO. If we continue to look at the relevant parts of the LCD for AFOs, we also have to be aware that in order to qualify for Medicare to pay for that L1960, we have to show that the patient could not be fit with a prefab AFO, or that they have a permanent condition. So obviously a prefab AFO may not last more than just a few months or a year. So you can show they have a permanent condition, or there's a need to control the foot and ankle in more than one plane. So we have to control not just in the sagittal plane, but maybe the transverse plane as well. Okay, or the patient has documented issues that require custom made because you don't want to damage their soft tissue, So the most common one is, say they have diabetes, and if they have delicate skin. So if you did an off the shelf on someone who has diabetes, there's potential that you would rub the skin the wrong way and potentially cause breakdown. So that's what they're saying is, a documented issue that would require custom made to prevent tissue injury. So those are the things, again, that you need to know, or they have a healing fracture, sorry. But those are the things that you would need to know that need to go into your documentation. So if your documentation about your AFO doesn't cover one of these conditions, then you would get it denied for medical necessity. So, and likewise, the doctor has to be documenting that as well. So here's some other language from the LCD that you would want to know. Now, I'm not saying that all of this should go into your notes, but you would just want to use this kind of verbiage in your notes. So the way Medicare reviews your billing when you send it in your documentation is they feed it into a computer. And the computer has software called natural language software that looks for keywords and can pick up on those words. And if it sees enough of the keywords, then you're less likely to have that documentation kicked back, or you're less likely to have the whole claim denied for documentation issues. So if you're saying the same thing as the LCD, but you're using different vocabulary, consider changing that, right? So let's say provide rigid immobilization. If your notes would say the AFO is solid and doesn't allow ankle movement in a certain plane, you're basically saying it provides rigid immobilization, but you would want to change that verbiage and say it provides rigid immobilization. So you're using their verbs, their words, and the way it does that is, and then you can explain it. So that's something to keep in mind. It has to be made of plastics or composite materials. That's, you would put that in your notes potentially. And it has to restrict or eliminate motion. So again, you'd want to say it restricts motion by doing this, and that this is why that's important, and etc. So again, you don't have to have all of these necessarily in your notes, but any of this, it describes an orthosis for Medicare. Mm-hmm. The medical record is actually the doctor's chart notes. Now, technically by policy, you can use chart notes from other healthcare providers, but they don't seem to be as powerful. So ideally, you would get doctor's notes and they would have everything you need in them. If you don't get that, then it's really helpful and important to get notes from other providers like a PT or someone like that, or a nurse practitioner or something like this. But if you only have PT notes and your notes, that's probably not going to be enough. If you have doctor's notes that are insufficient and you get physical therapy notes to sort of support them along with your notes, that would probably be okay. So just throwing it out there that, doctor's notes are the most important thing to get, but you can't always get those when you need them. So just to be clear too, what is the medical record and what isn't, and you might hear differently, right? By Medicare policy, the medical record is not the prescription. It's not any template that you've made as a P&O provider. It's not letters of medical necessity, and it's also not your notes. So none of those things count as medical record, and you have to have documentation about the orthosis, talk about what kind, in the medical record. So you still have to get a prescription. You can use a template. You can get a letter of medical necessity, although I would argue it's not very helpful. And you do still have to write notes, but you just need to be aware that all of those things are good to have. But if you don't also have doctor's notes, then these won't hold up under appeal, or under audit. And there's a lot of confusion out there about what is the medical record and what isn't. So you might hear people say, oh yeah, letters of medical necessity are part of the medical record. That's just false. And it kind of has changed. So it's understandable that people are confused about that, but it's right there in policy. You can look it up yourself where it says these things are not medical record. It's in the policy you have in front of you actually. So you can look that up if you want, but just to be aware, you might hear confusion about that. So again, looking at what the medical record has to say, the medical record by Medicare guidelines has to state the type of orthosis, the method of fitting, whether it's off the shelf or custom. It has to justify the need for that type of fitting. And then it has to have the medical necessity for custom versus prefab. Now, here's the rub, that it's really hard to get doctors to write all of this because they don't typically understand orthotics enough or prosthetics enough to write all of this stuff. So it's your job, it's everyone's job, including Medicare, to educate doctors on what they need to write along these lines. And all we can do is continue to try to educate our doctors. And that's no small task. It won't be easy for you when you get out to do that, but you just have to keep trying. And hopefully eventually they'll catch on and understand what needs to be in there. So just to be aware, by policy, that's what needs to be in the record. And you just do the best you can with that. But I would say, as a practitioner, I often hear, and I kind of feel it as well, that kind of makes me mad, right? Why is the doctor, who is not a specialist in what we do, who doesn't really understand prosthetics and orthotics, the one that has to document the type of orthosis, the method of fitting, the things that are really clearly in our scope of practice? A lot of people are angry about this, right? That doctors are expected to write all this when we have proven time and again that we are healthcare professionals and we should be the ones to determine the type of orthosis. The doctor can determine that the person needs an orthosis, but we should be the one to determine the type. Unfortunately, for myriad reasons that we do not have time to go into on this webinar, that's not the case currently. The Medicare has made a decision that doctors are the gatekeeper for any P&O device, along with many other things, but we were just one target in the crosshairs. But Medicare has decided that doctors need to be the one to document this type of thing. So for good or for bad, they need to state these things in their notes. The thing about that is that you have to also, and yours may be more clear and more detailed, and that will help you. So even if your doctor isn't writing what you need, you still need to write very clear, very detailed descriptions of all of these things and make sure that the reviewer can understand it, and then continue to work on your doctors to get them to write proper notes as well. Okay, so let's look at some examples of poor documentation as far as AFOs go. So here's some documentation that I received about, it wasn't that long ago, maybe 3 months ago, 4 months ago, something like that, for an AFO, and this was denied through Medicare, right? If you were able to read this, you would see that it actually has a lot of the information that's necessary, but you can't read it. right? So the problem is that it's really hard to read. It's really hard to see because it's handwritten. And, if you can't read it, the reviewer can't either. And everyone thinks their handwriting is very legible, but I would bet that if you handed any of your handwritten notes to someone on the street, they wouldn't be able to interpret it, even if you think you have good handwriting. So just as a general rule, don't handwrite your notes. And you'll hear a lot of practitioners say, well, I still handwrite because what's the difference? My notes don't matter. The fact is, practitioners' records absolutely do matter, and your billing, your claims can be denied. Even if you had super duper doctor's notes and everything was there, they can deny the claim based on your notes not being complete. So anybody who tells you your notes don't matter is just flat wrong. They do matter. Okay, so in this case, the medical record on this patient that we looked at, the handwritten note a minute ago, the medical record from the doctor and nurse said that despite the patient's bilateral muscle weakness, he's ambulatory. So that's great. You've got good support in the medical record for an orthosis right there. Another note said that he required support from a wheelchair or walker while wearing the AFO. So that's not great, but it's good to know, and we can address it going forward in the notes. So those were decent notes for medical record. So then we say, okay, well, the medical record had something we could work with. In that case, what did the orthotist notes say? Again, I know you couldn't read those notes, but unfortunately, they said nothing about ambulation. It said all kinds of stuff about muscle weakness, damage to tendons, issues with Charcot-Marie tooth, all of that, but not a word about whether the person could walk or not. It's so easy as a practitioner to slip into assumptions, right? Very often we make the assumption that, well, obviously, if the person has been wearing an AFO and they have walked in the past, they are ambulatory. So why do I have to explain that? Nothing. You can't take anything for granted in that way. So you can't assume that Medicare will know that the person is ambulatory unless you actually write it down. So it puts a big burden on you for notes, but if you know that going in, it makes it a little easier to do it correctly. Okay, so how could we improve the documentation? Well, if we look at the Program Integrity Manual, that's just another set of regulations for Medicare that you need to be aware of. If we look at that, it says that for Medicare to consider coverage and payment for an item, again, this is just supporting what I said earlier, the information from the supplier must corroborate the documentation from the doctor. So you are, in Medicare language, you as a P&O provider are the supplier. Okay, so it says basically that your notes have to corroborate the doctor's notes. And so that's just something for you to be aware of, that if the doctor writes the patient is ambulatory, your notes should also say that the patient is ambulatory, right? So it seems very redundant, but it's important to have it in both places. Okay, so let's move on to looking at the relevant parts of the LCD for prosthetics, for lower limb prosthetics, okay? Just to let you know, throw it out there, there is no local coverage determination or policy document through Medicare for upper extremity prosthetics. It's kind of weird, but it's a small enough group that they haven't made a published policy for that. So just FYI, if you're looking for one, you won't find it. So, okay, so let's talk about the lower limb prosthetics LCD. Again, hopefully you have that in front of you and the policy article. But what's important for us as practitioners to recognize is that we need to document these things from pulling out what's important for us from the LCD. The patient has to reach or maintain a functional state. They have to be motivated to ambulate. Probably if you've rotated through any practitioner's offices or done any P&O work before you started school, you've heard all these terms before, right? You have to have a K-level determination. That's something I'm sure is not new to you. But be aware that the doctor and the prosthetist both have to document the K-level determination in the chart. So it's daunting to get the doctor to write things, but if your notes are really excellent and use information from the doctor's notes to support your arguments on K-level, then you really have a much better chance of having your claims go through without issues or without audits. And then if you have therapist documentation, that all the better. That's just more support for your argument about why this person needs a prosthesis, right? And what K level they are. Okay, so in order to make a K-level determination, you would look at the patient's past history and their current conditions. You need to address both. A lot of people, if you've read a lot of notes out there, you'll see that a lot of prosthetists have got this part down. A lot of people know how to explain the patient's past history. The problem comes when they don't really explain the current condition of the patient. And that's an important piece that you want to keep in mind. Here's a question. Do doctor and PT K levels need to match? Ideally, they will match. However, if they don't, that's not a problem for billing necessarily. But for conservative billing, you would want to pick the lower of the two. So again, that's conservative. If you have a really good argument as to why you're going K3 when the PT went K2, you could point to really solid doctor's notes. If the doctor was very clear and went into some great detail about why the person's K3, then that would trump the PT's or level of K2, and you'd have a good argument for that. Having said that, most of the time the doctor's notes are not going to be as detailed as you'd like. So if the doctor's notes are typical, which means they don't say much that's helpful, and the PT puts the person at a K2 level, but you and the doctor had put the person at a K3, I would say conservatively you'd want to go with that lower K level, because it's really going to depend on how much support you have and who the support is from. Hopefully that's not too opaque. I hope that makes some sense. But bottom line is the notes that carry the most weight are the doctor's notes. So you would, be safer deferring to that. Hopefully that's helpful or clear. If that didn't answer the question, let me know. But yeah. Okay. So one thing that you want to always address in your notes about the patient's current condition is the status of the residual limb. That's not usually a problem. Most practitioners are pretty in tune with mentioning what the residual limb looks like. I mean, it's our whole focus. The one thing that needs to be in there that is often not is the nature of other medical problems. This is where P&O practitioners very frequently drop the ball, where we will talk about the residual limb ad nauseum in great detail, but then we'll never mention that the person has a heart problem, that the person has a history of CMT, say, or anything like that. We kind of don't look, we tend to fall into the habit of not looking at the whole person. And you want to be very careful of that. Make sure that you know their other medical issues as best you can and that you address them as far as how they affect mobility, right? So if you have a medical problem like congestive heart failure, history of congestive heart failure, or a history of coronary artery disease, it would seem that that's not in your realm, right? As a prosthetist, you're like, well, that's not really my department. But any comorbidity that you see in the patient's chart, you want to look at that from the realm of how is it possible that medical condition would affect mobility, and if so, how? And once I know that, I can say, is the prosthesis going to help with that or not? So again, if we look at the case of coronary artery disease, okay, we know that's a problem. Is that going to affect their mobility? Yeah, it potentially could make it so that they can't walk as fast or as far. So what does that mean for us with prosthetics? What that means is we need to make a prosthesis that's lightweight and has componentry on it that will allow the patient to not exert themselves, right? Still exercise, but not exert themselves so much that their heart rate goes up a lot and could, cause them to be out of breath because of their coronary artery disease or what have you, right? So you want to link those medical problems to the prosthesis. Always remember that the prosthesis is part of the person's overall mobility and their overall health and well-being. Be careful not to only focus on the device itself. Relate it to how it makes the person overall healthier. And again, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, okay, how is it making them overall healthier? And sometimes it helps to think, and if they didn't have a prosthesis, they'd be in a wheelchair, right? So if you think about how is a prosthesis going to help them get healthier overall versus a wheelchair, sometimes that can help you think about it in more clear terms. So, Okay, so here's your secret Jedi knowledge that people don't seem to know, current practitioners don't seem to know. I say it's secret in quotations because it's in print, it's in the policy from Medicare. It's not a mystery, but often practitioners don't read the policy. So in the local coverage determination, it says coverage is extended for feet and knees based on clinical documentation of functional need for the technologic or design feature of a given foot or knee. The reason I wanted to slow down right there and be very clear is that, firstly, clinical documentation is our documentation. Medical record is the doctor's documentation. Clinical documentation is our notes. Here is one place that you have full control, that you can really write excellent notes, be very clear, do not use abbreviations, do not handwrite, don't use P&O jargon, write it in layman's terms, write it so your mother can understand it. And remember, you're writing for a medical reviewer in this case. And if your notes explain the clinical need, the functional need for a specific feature of a given foot or knee, your notes are going to, your documentation, your billing, your claims are going to go through so much smoother. And I tell you, when you look at documentation as you get out into the field more, you will not find this in, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, in about 70 to 80% of the charts that you look at or the notes you look at from current practitioners, you will not find this. They do not explain it. And let me show you an example of that, okay? Because what we want to hone in on is that functional need for the design feature. What's the functional need? What does that mean? So let me show you this example, okay? Here is very typical documentation that I get all the time from practitioner. This is a specific one, but this is very common from multiple practitioners, where they're justifying the foot for this person. So they say it has an energy storing dynamic response foot that gives smooth heel toe transition. That would increase the stance phase duration for the patient, improve their symmetry, cadence, and step length. It has multi-axial rotation that permits improved ground compliance on uneven terrain or elevation changes. Ankle movement absorbs ground reaction forces while walking, and this foot's so great it allows 8 degrees of coronal plane movement. Okay, that was the justification for a foot this is a current justification in the last few months for a foot from a practitioner. So if you think to yourself as a reviewer, what is the functional need for these items? There's nothing in here about function. Is compliance on uneven terrain or elevation changes a functional need? No, it's a description of what the item does. That is the feature, that it is compliant on uneven terrain. That's the feature. Now we have to say how the feature relates to a functional task. So I have that feature on this foot. What does that do for me during the day? Okay, or if we talk about this feature of the foot is that it allows for smooth heel toe transition and gives increased stance phase duration. That's a feature of the foot. But there's nothing in here about what that means, how that translates to functional ability for the patient. Okay, so that's bad documentation. It's a lot of words, it's a lot of great jargon, it's a lot of big vocab, but this didn't tell the reviewer anything they wanted to know. Okay, so how can we improve this documentation? Let's take the same thing. This is the same patient. This patient, you always want to use the patient's name. That's really important. Frequently use the name in there so they know that you're not using a template and you're not like using a template wording for the same person over and over, for different people with the same wording. So use their name. Mr. M requires dynamic response for even stride and improved symmetry, right? Equal stride length. So there's the feature. Because that can reduce fatigue and increase endurance. Okay. And why does he need that? Because specifically for this patient, he wants to return to golf. Why do I want him to return to golf? If I'm Medicare, why did I feel like he should return to golf? Because that's going to improve his quality of life. His overall quality of life will improve. And Medicare does want to see that. So although golf seems frivolous, maybe it is a way for him to get out of the house, be involved in the community, get exercise. It's going to improve his quality of life. They pay for that. So, and he has a history, this patient has a history of hypertension and myocardial infarction, so heart problems, right? So because his heart problems are a concern, the reviewer might say, oh, wait, you want to reduce his fatigue because he has heart problems, but you're saying he can golf. Well, now we have to explain that yes, he does have heart problems, but we don't expect that to interfere with his mobility because we're going to fit him with the appropriate prosthesis. And according to his doctor, because we got the doctor's notes and we reviewed them, the heart problems are under control with medication. So this is the key thing. You need to be able to explain the feature, how it relates to functional activity, how that relates to Medicare's key interests, which is quality of life, overall health and well-being, community involvement, those kind of things. So we did that. And then you need to mention that, by the way, if we get him to walk more, don't worry, he's not going to die of a heart attack, because even though he's walking more, his medical condition, his heart conditions are controlled with medication. And we've got doctor's notes to back that up. Okay. So let's go further with that and say, okay, why does he need improved step symmetry and even stride length? What's another reason he needs that? It will also decrease the overuse of the other side. Well, that's great. They all do that. Why is that important for him? Well, because we need to protect his skin. And why is his skin at risk? Because he had a recent history of ulcers on the sound side foot. So again, we've linked a feature of the prosthesis to this patient's medical diagnoses and this person's functional need. Okay, that's huge. If your documentation does that, you are light years ahead of most practitioners out there currently. Yeah, and your claims are going to go through much smoother, and you're going to see fewer denials and audits, regardless of what you get from the doctor. Now, ideally, you still want to get great notes from the doctor. You still want to educate them. But again, if your notes are at this level, you will see fewer audits, and you will be able to spend that time that you're not doing audits and dealing with that in educating your doctors to write even better notes. So there you go. Okay, one more thing about this patient, another functional need and design feature. This guy needs multi-axial movement. And again, you'd want to put this in very layman's terms. This isn't another prosthetist reading this necessarily. It might be a nurse or an OBGYN or any number of medical professionals. So explain that. Don't use jargon. Multi-axial movement, that's up, down, side to side movement of the ankle with rotation capability of the foot and ankle. So we need to give him that because we need to absorb the forces of walking, prevent those forces from transferring to the knee. Why do we not want those to transfer to the knee? Because this patient specifically had a doctor's note that said he had knee surgery in the recent past, for degenerative changes. So his knee is at risk. So we're building a prosthesis that will protect his knee. Okay, so again, we're linking it to his overall health, his overall capability. And so I just want to dispel some myths, because I'm really sure that when you go out into practice and when you work with current practitioners, you're going to hear a lot of, you're going to go in guns blazing and say, I read the LCD, I understand the policy article, and I read it frequently. And you're going to hear practitioners say, oh, you're silly, you're wasting your time. That's for the front office. You don't need to do that. They're just wrong. They're living in an old world. They're doing things old school way, and that's just wrong. You as a practitioner need to know the policy, and you need to understand it and how it relates to you seeing the patient and writing notes. So another thing that you might, obviously now you need to get your doctor's notes, and you need to apply them in your justifications. They need to be part of your documentation from the start. But you're going to hear from practitioners all the time that that's overkill. You couldn't possibly get doctor's notes on every patient. It would take too much time. I'm here to tell you that appealing claims takes time. Appealing claims and being stuck in audits takes a ton of your time as a practitioner, not just the front office staff. It takes their time too. But practitioners aren't immune to that. You will get sucked into it, and you'll have to help get past that audit. And so if you hear a practitioner say, oh, we don't do that, well, time to change their ways. Okay. Another thing, you need to justify every single code that you put on them, and you need to do it related to the individual patient. No generic justifications. They can be a starting place, but you have to back them up with something specific to the patient. So here's a question too. So giving more information is better. Not necessarily. Thank you for clarifying that. giving specific information about the patient and linking that with the doctor's notes and making a coherent argument, that's what you need to do. More information and just loading them up with hundreds of pages of doctor's notes with no explanation, or 30 pages of your handwritten notes that don't explain how it relates to the patient, you could turn in 600 pages of that stuff and it's still going to get denied. Whereas a clear argument that explains the need for the prosthesis and how it relates to the person's overall medical conditions can be done in one page and would be much more effective than the 600 pages of non-specific information. So more information is not necessarily better. Specific information is better, and detail on the patient. So if we talk about the justifying every code, you'll hear probably, I would bet, when you go out there, if you haven't heard it already, practitioners will tell you that your notes don't matter, and that they know that for a fact because they still get paid, and they know that their notes have not been read. So they'll get paid on a claim, and they've written nothing, and they're like, oh, see, it still got paid even though. And you will sometimes get paid for claims, even with bad notes on your side. But I'm telling you, that's not going to last. It's already ending. It's already getting more and more common for people to have denials because the practitioner's notes were bad, even though the doctor's notes were decent. So that is true maybe now, but it's not going to last. And then the big one, private insurance company policies do differ from Medicare in a lot of ways. So make sure that before you see a patient, if at all possible, you get their policy related to the device you're about to work with them on. So if you're about to see them for an AFO, get the AFO policy from their specific type of insurance and read it and understand it. They're usually only a couple pages, sometimes up to 5, but you can pull out the information that's relative or relevant to you as a practitioner. And knowing Medicare policy as a start will help you understand the private insurance policies better. Usually the private insurance policies are easier to work with. They're less murky. They're more clear. And so if you can understand Medicare policy, you'll find private insurance policy a breeze. Right, so, and here's another one. If you haven't heard it already, you're probably going to hear it quite a bit, or you might hear it whispered. They don't know you're standing there. But often I hear people say, oh, these new graduates, they don't have hand skills. They spend all their time on paperwork. All they know is numbers and all that, but they can't modify, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we know that's not true. We know that you guys have hand skills and that you are taught that in school. But here's the scoop. Even if you had 0 hand skills, again, not true, but even if you had 0 hand skills, you would do better to know your documentation better than anything else, right? Even if you did spend all your time on paperwork and documentation, welcome to now, okay? Welcome to 2015. Documentation is how you're going to get paid, okay? Hand skills are important, and you want to hone those, and you want to do it, but documentation is how your paycheck gets into your bank account. So anybody who tells you it's not important or that hand skills are more important, I beg to differ. Okay, thank you so much to SPS for sponsoring this and bringing this to you. This is free for you guys because of them. And so we appreciate that, I'm sure.